Hello and welcome back to the channel. Last video for the holidays I did on Nuxt tRPC, and after kind of getting through all that, I was checking out the guy who wrote the Nuxt tRPC. Let me get to him. I was checking out the guy who actually wrote the Nuxt tRPC, and I saw that he had this other module that he wrote called nuxt-remote-fn. So, in my investigation, I found that I actually like nuxt-remote-fn a lot better than Nuxt tRPC because you don't have all that boilerplate. And I'm going to kind of walk through his example that he has here in a video, set up a simple project, saving some data with SQLite database instead of going to all the Prisma setup. And we'll see what you think. I think you might like it. So, we'll just cut down to the bottom. So we'll just cut down to the bottom here to the why this module, which I think is really important. Using Nuxt TRCP, you've got to go through this whole process of the event handler. There's a bunch of boilerplate code. But with this, if you follow the process of how it's all set up, what you just get is a simple function that you call. So if we look here, where are we actually calling the function? Yeah, in your client, you just call the remote function as if it's a regular function, and you get all the type safety that comes across with it. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to try to keep this simple, just to kind of show the functionality, and if people like it, maybe we'll go all crazy and add Prisma or some other ORM to it to kind of see how I honestly think it gives you a fair bit of the functionality that you get from tRPC, but like he says here, without all the ceremony. So let's get to it. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Always looking for feedback on the content I create. So let's go. And so we'll just create a new Nuxt project. We'll name the application remote function Nuxt app. And we'll worry about updating later. Now let's install some additional dependencies. So first let's change it to the directory, cd, what did I call this thing? Remote function Nuxt app. Now let's add the remote function module along with better SQLite. And then we need to add the types for better SQLite. So now that basics are done, let's get to the code. We'll launch Visual Studio Code. All right, now let's update our Nuxt config to include the plugin. Now we have our plugin in, and I believe we are ready to go. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to come in up here and create a live directory, which is where we're going to put all of our server functions. And then inside the live directory, you create the file. You can create multiple files that have server functions. You're just going to import them into your client. So I'm just going to call this first one API. Have to have the server in the middle. .ts. And like I said, you're just setting this up like you would any normal function. So let's drop a function in here. And like I said, we're going to keep this real simple. Return, and then we're going to say return basic function. And then we'll have some property that we pass in so we can see the type safety. All right, so we have exported our function. We have our value. We're going to pass in a string, and we're just going to return that. So now let's go to our client. We'll just work in app view for now. We don't try to keep things simple. We'll just say p and basic result. Script setup, Lang TypeScript. And then in here, of course, we need to import our function. And so I think that was that basic function. Oh, sorry, I need to add that from here. And then on the end, we'll just const, what did I call it? Basic result equals basic function Aaron. And also you see how you get the type there. This returns a promise. Let's confirm that. API, yeah, that guy has to, this needs to be async. No, it doesn't. But what you get back, you can see here is, well, actually, let's just run it and see. But I think that needs to be async by default. So let's go to our app, and as you can see, it's giving us a promise back. So let's change this to wait. And now we get our basic function Aaron. And let's change this to Aaron Saunders. And we're getting our function working. So that's the basics. And if all you wanted was the basics, you got it, and you can run off and get started, check the documentation, and go from there. But let's create something a little bit more complex here. So what we're going to do is as I said, we're going to integrate a SQLite database. We're just going to save some records in a database, and we're going to query some records from a database. And we're going to do it all without the boilerplate of tRPC. We're going to do it all without making requests to the back end and setting up API routes and all the other stuff. We're just going to do it with functions. So let's get started with that part. So let's set up the service that's going to control our SQLite database. So let's go into our lib and create a new file and call it SQLite service. And we're just going to drop in some code to support this. So there's our SQLite service file. Let's drop in some code. So here's our code. We're importing our SQLite database, instantiating the database. The documentation says that this helps with performance. What we're doing, it probably doesn't matter, but I'm just putting it there for completeness. And then we have our script here, which will create our table if one doesn't exist. And we're just keeping an ID. We're keeping a field called stuff, which is text, and then important, whether or not it's important or not. And then we are creating the table, which is create table run. And then we're going to export the database so we can have access to it. So now we have our database set up. So the next thing to do is to go into our API service. We can leave this basic function here, but we're going to have to add some more stuff. So the first thing we want to do is, what do we want to do first? I guess the best thing to do is to add some stuff. So let's do add stuff. And this is where we're going to add some stuff to the database. So export const add the stuff. And we know we need stuff. And we need to know if it's important or not. PORTNT, and then we're going to execute some code here. We do also want to make sure export const async, but since the whole idea around this is for types, let's add our type up here at the top for when we're inputting stuff. So we have this type called stuff input, and its stuff is string. Important is either 0 for false and 1 for true. So now we can assign this here to stuff input. And so now we have the stuff input. The next thing that we need to do is we need to access our database and kind of prepare the query for adding stuff to the database. So here's how we're going to insert stuff into the database. So basic SQL call, insert into stuff. Stuff is the string. Important is the integer value. And then because we have the prepare statement, we have these 2 question marks here to count for. That's for the stuff, and the second one's for the input values. But we need our database, so let's import our database. So now we've imported our database from the SQLite service that we created previously. So let's save that. And so then after we prepare the query, we have to actually it's a mutation, not really a query, but after we do that, we need to actually run it. And you can see now how what we're doing with this prep constant here, you call run on it, and then you pass in the actual values that you want to be replaced here for the insert. And then we'll get our result back. And our result is what we're going to return. And so I think we're good now for our add the stuff. So let's hop over to our app view and let's kind of create a function const add stuff to database. And we can now import our function here, add the stuff, and we can say const new record result equals await add the stuff to database. This needs its async here. And then we can see when I hover over this, why am I not getting add stuff to database? Oh, I've imported the wrong thing. I wanted to import add the stuff. Add the stuff. There we go. And now it's complaining because it needs arguments, and you can see we got the type information that came over to us. So we know what it needs here. It needs stuff. So let's go here and type stuff. And stuff is of type string. So let's say first record. And then it needs the next variable, which is important. And we know that it can be either 0 or 1. And so let's say 1 for true, so it's important. First record is important. All right, so we'll get our new result. And let's just console log new record result. And this is our first function to add something to the database. And let's just go up here into basic result and add a button, add to database. And here we're going to add our click event. And then on our click event, we'll call add stuff to database. So that will call our function. It should add this record and kind of do a console log so that we can see it was added. Let's start to kind of put some space around some things because it's going to get hairy here pretty quickly. In the end, we'll clean it up and add a basic UI on it. But let's just give us some space here. Simple one here is just a style. And okay, so let's see what we got. So we have our add to database button. Let's open up to see if we can get our console log. All right, and let's click add to database. So add to database, what did we get? So we inserted a row because that's our result right there. So now we know we got a result inserted. So the next thing we want to do is actually see those results. So let's go back to our code. And what we want to do here is we want another function that's going to actually show us all the stuff in the database. So let's go back to our API server. And so we have our add the stuff. And then now here, let's do get all stuff. Scroll this up a little bit. I'm going to follow the very same pattern here. So I think let's just start by just copying this here just to get us started. And export const get all the stuff. And let's kind of paste in the stuff we're going to. So we're not, yes, this time we're definitely preparing a query. And with SQLite, you do all. I'm not passing any parameters because parameters are unknown. And we know this query, not insert into stuff, but select CLECT star from stuff. That's all we got to do. And that will give us our result. So prep all, result, and then we're going to return the result, get all the stuff. We have our database imported already. This is pretty straightforward. So now let's go back to our app view and let's go to our app view and let's just drop this in here. And so we're going to say const result equals get all. Oh, can I do this? Get all the stuff. Let's see if it'll auto import it for us. No, it won't. So we'll just drop it in up here. So we go up here, add all the stuff. I think it's called get all the stuff. Yep, get all the stuff. And you can see it says the return is an unknown array type. We'll fix that also. But now we can say await get all the stuff. Unknown result. We have our result object there. For now, let's just take this basic result out and just return result up here. And you can see we have our first record that we added to the database. But the interesting, what we want to fix, see, I watch this. When I click add to database, I got the result, so I know it's added, but my UI is not updated. I have to actually click refresh to get the next one. So let's kind of do something about that. So if we look back at the documentation, they say here we can use this useAsyncData to get some data back, and there's some interesting things that happen when I introduce useAsyncData. So let's do this. So let's copy this code here, get this back, and let's go back to our app. And in our app, we're going to use useAsyncData here. We're going to change this to get all the stuff. We'll say stuff, and we're going to say stuff results. Kind of get some of our naming right, because we're going to clean this up a bit, and having the names appropriate will be helpful. So we'll change that to stuff results. Get all the stuff. Did I not mark? Well, I did not mark this as async, so let's mark this as async. And then go back. Also, did you notice how you're able to just kind of hop around directly to your function? So that's pretty awesome. Also makes it very easy. So what we have on here is we have the results that we get back, and we also can get back an error object, and we'll call this stuff results error. So if we actually do get some error, it's separated out. Okay, let's format this. And so now we get the query, and you can see our query is still working fine. But what we want it to do is we want it to automatically update every time I add a record. So what you can do is, I believe on here, there's a watch, and we want to watch for changes for whenever I get a new results record, right? So because I want to do that, I'm going to have to move this result record outside of this function. So let's do this. Let's make this a ref. Let's say value. And then we'll go up here and const new record result equals ref. And then down here, I want to watch this record result. So basically, anytime this thing changes, it will re-execute this query. And so then we should automatically get the updates that we're looking for. So it's got this it has this dependency on this new record result. And so now let's save. Let's go back to our UI and add to database. And you can see it's automatically now updating my query every time I add a new record to the database. So that's what we wanted to see. So now let's clean this up a bit, because we took this approach because we wanted the benefit of types, right? And so here we do get the database result type, so that is helpful. But here on our stuff results, we're just getting this unknown type. And so we can fix that by creating, like the same way we create a type for the input here, we can create a type for this array that comes back. So let's go back to our API server. And where's my query? Here's my query. We know what this type is that comes back because it has to match the database that we created here. It's an integer, it's a stuff ID, and it's important, it's a Boolean. So let's go to our API server and create type stuff, and type stuff, and type stuff. We can start off with what the stuff input is, and then we know we have an ID on here. There's a number. And so now this is our stuff object. ID stuff important, let's check. ID stuff important. So that's our stuff object. And then we can use that to set an array here. So when we get our results, we can say results as stuff array. So now if we go back to our main app and we look at this result, we get our stuff array as a result. So then what we can do, which is more interesting, is you can see now I have this, here inside my template, I have the types. So we can, and like everything else, we'll clean this up later. We can do a v4 item from stuff results, in, and then we need our key on here. And the first thing that we can see is when I drop my item in there, I get the types for my item. So we got the types. So like I said, it's pretty awesome. So we have the types that we created on our server side. I have access to them on my client side. I can remove this stuff results here now, and inside of here we can just drop something basic for now, and we can say item. Let's see what we got. And so we have all of our records. The the important thing, once again, is the types. We're getting our types from a server API call. Actually, not a server API call, it's a basic function call. I think the last thing we need to do here is to just clean up this UI a little bit so we can show that we can actually add different types of values to the database. Also, let's show some errors too. So let's do this. Oh no, we'll show the errors when we add the records. So we'll put in, let's create another div on top here. And inside here, we'll drop some code to create a basic form to add some records. All right, I dropped some code in here. Let me kind of walk through what we're doing. Let's create it. So we need an input field to get the stuff, text, and then we need an input field to set the important flag. The rest of this is just styling. So let's go down here and let's create some new refs. And we will say we have our important input and we have our stuff input. And we're going to use them here. So for stuff, we're going to use our stuff input. And for important, we're going to use our important input. But remember, our important input on this, where did it go? On this checkbox, the value I'm going to get is true or false. But I need to pass in an integer of either 0 or 1. So we're going to say important input.value. If it's true, then return 1. If it's false, set to 0. And then we're just going to pass our input stuff in. And so that's how we should be able to add records to the database. So let's give it a try. Where's my important checkbox? Oh, inputs. That should just be input. Okay. So not important. And we're not going to check that. So let's add the database. And you can see it added my not important stuff. And then we'll go here, we'll say really is important. And let's check that and add the database. And we get our really is important, and we have the important flag set on it. And as you can see, it's automatically updating everything. One last thing. So obviously you're going to check for errors on the client side, but you can see here, if I don't enter in a value and I add the database, it's going to add stuff with the blank field. You could check on the client side, but let's also show how you can check for that error on the server side. So let's go back to our API service, and on add the stuff, we want to throw an error if the stuff isn't set. So we can say if there's no stuff, so it's null, stuff, or stuff dot, like you could use dot or something like that on the server side here instead of kind of doing it like the approach I have, but I just want to kind of get to this. If length equals 0, then we want to throw an error. ROW, create error, and we'll look for an error string, invalid parameters. So we'll throw, so if you don't pass a value in for stuff, we'll throw an invalid parameter. Now let's go back to our app and see how we're going to catch this error. So what we'll do is down here, we'll wrap our add stuff to database with a try catch. And if we have an error, then we'll say new record error.value equals error as nuxt error. And then let's create a ref to hold my error. And then we can come up here to our code and let's add our errors. Actually, let's move some things around because it seems kind of weird. If we look at our code, it seems kind of weird. I've added database buttons down here, so let's move that up. And we will add that inside of this top div. We'll change this margin down to 8 to have it match everything else. Okay, that seems better. So we have our database to me list, and let's squeeze our errors in right in between here. And so what we'll do is right in here, we'll display errors. Let's say P v if new record error adding record, and then we will say new record error. Looks like I'm gonna have to add this up here so I can get my type. So let's go to new record error. Actually, let's do this. I don't need the whole error. I just need some of the information off of it. And it's actually data and then message is what I want off of the error. And so we'll just keep it simple and just make it a string. And so then I can just display the new record error. If there's a new record error, we'll display new record error. All right, so let's see if we can make this happen. So add the database, error adding record invalid parameters. It didn't add the record, and we can see the error message that we got back from my API call. And let's make sure that everything else still works. Important, add the database. Still works, important, adds database. So we showed how to manipulate a simple database, and in your solution, the SQLite service could be anything. Like you could be off writing out to a Firebase database, Supabase database, your own Postgres database, Mongo, anything you want. It's just a service. The important thing here is that you can now create these functions that are type safe and have access to them in the client and have access to all the types that go along with it. I think this is pretty awesome. Like I said, I'm just kind of touching the surface on all of this stuff. I will post all the source code for this and an associated blog post. Hope you find it enjoyable. If you want to see more of this, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. Thanks and talk to you later. Bye.